Good morning, YouTubers, friends, School of Tomorrow. I'm going to start with this picture. I think it says a lot. It's got the Eden Dome project in the back. We talked about that quite a bit on this channel. And I'd say a theatrical, like a bow kind of, like people on a stage. People we know, these are people in the news. Central Casting has produced these people. And then I go into this essay where there's a subculture and ethnicity, you could say, where we're already from the future in a sense. So we're kind of looking back at what we call the 150 blood clots. Obviously, that's meant as kind of a pejorative. Nobody wants blood clots, but we're talking about the thinning of that blood now since the desovereignization of the 1980s. Now, who thinks like that? Very few people have that kind of a narrative going, and that's kind of where I wanted to start, just to say there is kind of an ethnicity, kind of a flavor here, but it's not anti-United Nations. And I just wanted to start out by leaning over. Can you see the flag there behind me? Should I lean the other way? I use it as a curtain, and it is upside down, but that's not out of any disrespect. It's just that's where the eye hooks were, so I can hang it, and it's clearly not big enough. And the ergonomics that I'm living in are pretty good. I don't want to complain, but I do want to start out like that, autobiographical, and in a personal workspace in a nerd cave now, like here. I can armchair tourist, right? With COVID and all that, and plus, it's not my business right now to be flying around the world, but I don't have to. And I can put any country in my face and study it in interesting ways. I'm going back in time with Princeton stuff right now, and I'm going to bring up Princeton again. Note the orange and black logo down there. And that UN flag there behind me that doubles as a curtain, that's, I say in my essay here, even more necessary now. Somewhere I say even more necessary now. I talk about how I like the UN. Growing up, our family worked for the UN from time to time, maybe just one time. I think that was the Manila Bay infill project to make more kind of high-end real estate in Manila Bay. Now, Dad wasn't really, he was more into the grassroots kind of planning, so he jumped ship and he found a situation with USAID, which I know is going to sound like a lot of people have no patience for any of the U.S. agencies. But the thing is, we're trying to explain in our worldview that a lot of that you've misplaced a lot of your anger if you think it's the U.S., because in our mythology or narrative, there's no U.S. to blame at this point. We're in a past, that's in the past. We're in the wake of nations, and I'm having afterthoughts about it. But it's not like it's out of codependence, not because they all flew apart somehow, the nations. They all integrated. Like they're all so interconnected. It's like if you took a can of paint and took a computer motherboard and started painting a computer motherboard and dividing it up according to the blue and the green like a jigsaw puzzle, what would that be about? Like, how would that help? It might help. You could put like, oh, most of the computing goes on here and paint the CPU a color. But with nation states, they're a layer on motherboard Earth. And the project is not to, quote, make them go away or do something like extreme around nations. The point is to adjust your lenses so that if you don't want to have them in the foreground, you can have them kind of as theater on cable or wherever you watch political shows. You can still have your political shows. That's the reassurance. You can have your congresses and your parliaments and all that. Why not? And develop them more. I think once the stress is off, to believe in them so fervently, that's the problem. When you lose faith in something, you clutch fervently and in an overzealous manner. Whereas if you can just back off a little bit and take it a little more like theater, a little more like television, a sport even, I think, a lighter touch helps, if that makes any sense. Also, time space wise, I was talking about the walnut tree event that happened a little bit ago. This walnut tree just fell over, right? This is my neighbor's backyard. I'm looking from my space over to theirs. I even went through the fence because there's a gate we have. And so, there's different angles and points of view, right? On this micro event right in my face, kind of. So this is my little reality here, right? My little reality bubble. And then I'm in this nerd cave and I'm trying to schedule a booster shot for me and my mom, and they're all taken up, and there's no way to get one right now in Portland. Now, I could drive to Salem perhaps. There are things I could do to get out of town to get a booster, but Portland, at the moment, the websites are not reassuring. Fred Meyers, forget about it, that kind of thing. So that's time and space. And I've been watching this November 20th, Daniel Friedman, same name as Elizabeth, right? Anyway, just the last name, I mean. I'm just mnemonics again, right? Anyway, good stuff on Blake, and I wanted to say I'm really into Blake, and I think the easiest way for a lot of people is going to be that poem, Tiger. I'd spell it with Y because I think that's more, feels authentic. And I think maybe it really was spelled that way. And the orange and black, which, it's very cliche, but being a Princeton guy, I have orange and black in that respect. Also, as a kid, I always said orange was my favorite color. And also, Halloween is orange and black. And I like because that's kind of straddling kind of the living and the dead, you could say. The active and the passive, you could say. And somewhere in one of my writings, it ends with a big, either omnitriangulated or hexapen or Goldberg or one of those balls that's all just orange and black. Except black is just where there's no light, so there'd just be orange flashing randomly, you could say. That would be a good segue to my conversation here about Goldbergs. Here they are. I got to turn off the sound on these. Good music, by the way. This artist does a really good job with his videos, and I've called them featured artists, and I put the kanji there. But I want to talk about hypertunes to close out, and I want to pick up on one of Daniel's questions, certain passages about, Fuller is often sounding too boastful to our ears. There's a lot of resistance to connecting to Fuller's literature because of various resistors, you could say. The circuitry, we're still fine tuning, right? So that it's just okay to integrate all this research, because we're doing such interesting stuff now, right? Connecting up the volume formulas from the different traditions. Kaylee Menger is next here, but you don't have to wait for me. And a lot of the time, I think that's what we're trying to overcome is until we make Bucky more mainstream and attract a lot of really talented, intelligent people to the job, it's going to be left to, I'm not going to say I'm slow, but I am just me. And there's not a lot of people doing a lot of research, funded or otherwise. So I think if for the last 40 years if we'd been able to get off it with Bucky, as Werner Erhard would have said, and he worked at it, then we could have had a lot more done, I think, in terms of making a sphere packing matrix a home base in our thinking, And, what would you do if someone came to you and said, okay, I got it about the XYZ coordinate system, I understand it. Now, if I give you this sphere packing matrix as a home, do you want to keep that coordinate system exactly, or do you want to, think of another one to work with it? And I think that's a question we could all ask, and it doesn't mean we're all going to get the same answers either. And I see Alexander Graham Bell asking that question, you could say. And so, from a PR point of view, I think I'm pretty good at spinning this stuff so that it does have a good chance of getting into the curriculum. But thanks to me as a spin doctor advertiser, more than as maybe a designer, but less as a math whiz, right? I'm not going to come out there and impress you with my super duper knowledge of math because I pitch it at the high school level, as I've shown you. But with the hypertune concept, which is a lot of what this blog is about, this coffee shops network, I was a philosophy guy at Princeton, right? Wittgenstein, big part of what I studied. Aspect shifts, Gestalt shifts, leaving everything as it is. He says philosophy is about leaving everything as it is. It's just you who need to see it differently. And that's like when you suddenly aren't really seeing nations anymore, but you're seeing people acting like there's nations. You see the theater, but you can't really believe the play anymore. You just can't believe it the way that they want you to believe it. I mean, you see the same things everyone else sees. You just don't think about it quite the same way. You don't really see a lot of separate nation state actors. They're just not there. But you see individuals, you see people. It's kind of like when I say I don't see races, it's not that I'm colorblind. I see color clearly. And there's RGB value for every skin tone, let's say. But how significant is that? And do you see, how do you divide the world? Like, I think ethnicity is a very important concept, and it does not map very well to things like skin color. So that's why we keep making more and more mistakes. It's like if we're a machine learning program and sampling, there might have been a time when you could match up like skin tone to likely political stances or something like that. If you're in a local area, okay, maybe it's a 1-to-1 match. If you're black, you vote Democrat. But forget about things like that going forward. I mean, really simple minded rules of thumb based on what you call race. I don't think those rules are going to work very well. And better to just think in terms of ethnicity. And when you think of ethnicity, remember that's more your choice. You can be born ethnicity A and die ethnicity B, or you can just keep blending them. And you can declare more on a form what your ethnicity is, what you think of it as. And it doesn't matter that I'm South African, you could say. And to an ignorant person, that means you're claiming to be black or something because you're from Africa. But if you've been to South Africa, if you know the real situation, Africans should have nothing to do with skin color, right? I'm an African, I'm an American. That information that you're getting from any of those words. Okay, so I'm going off into a tangent here, obviously. But I just wanted to say, in terms of hypertunes, which are segues, right? They're scenarios, intervals, um, animations, if you do it simple, could be done with live action, that they all segue into each other and they make kind of a spaghetti ball of scenarios, right? So, like, I'm talking about Blake and Tigers, and then I'm suddenly talking about race, and now I'm talking about this. So, that's kind of an audio hypertune. It's a wandering style. You could call it a reverie. But what's a visual hypertune? Not just a wandering stream of consciousness or something. And here, it is still like a stream of consciousness, but it's a visual, right? Like I'm showing you here. They're actually playheads running through a space of already canned cartoons and stringing them together, though, in a smooth way because they're designed that way. They're designed to one leads to another so that you don't necessarily see exactly where the segues are and stuff like that. It's quite seamless. So in that respect, as a final topic, I just want to say, going to the figure index and synergetics, here's a trick. Remember, synergetics is online, and you can go to any part of it. From the back is where I go, from figure index, because I often just want to check a picture. But I know that if I go to the table of contents up here on the left and scroll down, I can get to the 32 color plates and other such interesting assets. And in the color plates, they come up as thumbnails, small, and I'm looking for this one in particular, plate 31, right? So this is what we've been talking about quite a bit lately, both on the trim tab list and Daniel's video. How is it that the four planes of the tetrahedron, as they move closer and closer together, what happens when they intersect? And here's a zone version of that cuboctahedron that you see drawn at the bottom, E. Now, there's slightly different edge links here, so take this with a slight grain of salt. But the point is, with where Fuller's at with this closest packed sphere matrix, is the radial jump from any point outward from where you are in 12 directions. The integer hop is matched by a way to go around that's also integer hops. And you'll notice that when the four planes of the tetrahedron intersect, you get like four hexagons. And the hexagons all intersect to make this 24 edged on the surface. 24 is 6 times 4, right? So non-redundant four hexagons that are parallel to the faces of this original tetrahedron. They move inward and intersect as four hexagons to give the shape. And Fuller seems kind of to gloat or be proud of the fact that he has these rational ways to get around that to an ordinary XYZ schooled people, it doesn't read it right. It's like, what did you say? What are you thinking? It's not the way I'm thinking. It's not. It's alien a lot of the time. That's what I think the tenor of synergetics is a lot, is that he seems to do sideways moves that do not correspond to our rigid bottom-up structuralist. His structure is like this, holding in the chaos, whereas our structural idea of structural is to thrust vertically in a skyscraper or whatever. Lots of thoughts on skyscrapers. I'll spare you for now. In review, where we're looking is for more researchers to feel like it's okay to jump into the swimming pool. You can jump out easily. You don't have to keep cursing that you have Bucky to talk about, that he's part of this index of your textbook and so on. That this generic emphasis on, quote, the geometry of nature is also found in Linus Pauling. It's just Fuller encapsulated the paradigm shift in a very coherent way. It was kind of really looking from far out and seeing a big change in intellectual history, a shift from 90 degrees to 60 degrees. And at grunch.net, I used to have a great video, a hypertune really almost, by myself and Richard Hawkins. Now if I go to grunch.net, because it got hacked as a WordPress site, it got dumbed down as well. And I don't, oh, there it is. No, I did put it back. I did get that back. I was going to say I wish it was there, but it is there. And this, let me end on, is kind of the earliest hypertune that I collaborated on. And I didn't have the graphic sophistication that I developed later. The one I showed you earlier, I did myself in Python. This is piggybacking on the graphical capabilities of Richard. And I'm just sending him verbose kind of storyboard script ideas, like for little scenarios, how you could connect how you could create these animations in segments. And so I've always had that visual lexical parallelism going, right, in my thinking. It's like I'll talk a certain way, but then there's a way to visualize that goes with that. And I think synergetics, it's the same. Everything you read in synergetics, you could have a reverie going along beside it, and it would make more sense with both left and right brain, as I say. As it's just a shop talk. It doesn't have to really mean anything in terms of brain anatomy, but it could, right? All right, we'll talk some more. I hope this is all interesting.